And hello, everyone, and welcome to the Governance and Risk Meeting number 185. My name is Peyton. I go by Pros11 online, and I'm one of the governance facilitators here at MakerDAO. Looks like today is the 7th of April, 2022 now. Yeah, 4 months in, I can remember that. That's a good sign. I'm joined here today by a bunch of awesome people who both work and are interested in the Maker protocol. This is our weekly sync where we go over things relating to governance and risk aspects of the protocol. As usual, we got a bit of an agenda to get through, but a couple small housekeeping items to take care of first. Obviously, this meeting is being recorded, so do try not to talk over one another. Also, we do encourage open participation. So if you do have a question and you want to hop on the mic, super helpful to raise your hand. We can call on you that way. You can also drop it in the comments section. I'll be happy to read it out for you if you're unable or unwilling to hop on the mic yourself. But otherwise, if there's a lull in the conversation or you got a question about something being talked about, feel free to jump in. All right, I think that should cover it. So as usual today, we're going to start with our governance roundup. I'll get into the vote updates, starting with the polls. So last week there were 2 polls, both of them passed. The first one was the Open Market Committee's proposal, changing a number of rates there. And the second was to launch the Maker wormhole with the Optimism and Arbitrum domains. So both of those have passed, and should see them coming up fairly quickly here. For sure, the Open Market Committee, I'll put on the next slide, and the wormhole at P's availability. So speaking of the executive, last week's executive was passed and executed. That contains some core unit budget distributions, as well as vesting stream setups. We had a couple of the keeper networks. Basically, we had to set up a budget stream for one of them, and that is all set now. Tomorrow's planned contents, we have recognized delegate compensation, a funding die transfer for the Amsterdam event special purpose fund, Open Markets Committee proposal I mentioned a few moments ago, as well as an increase of 3 million to 5 million for the Curve ETH staked ETH pool. Excellent. So yeah, you can expect to see those tomorrow. Please do pay attention when that goes online and vote if you support those changes. All right. Next up on our agenda, I believe we will have the MIPS update. Is it Pablo giving that today?
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Peyton. Hello, everyone. Pablo here with a MIPS update. I hope my mic is working right now. So next slide, please. Thank you. So we have one weekly cycle sub-proposal that is currently going through its frozen period, which in this case also entails a signal request, an ongoing signal request that upon passing will promote MIP4C3 SP3 to an on-chain 3-day ratification poll, which we are calling short ratification polls. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we've had 14 formal submissions for this April's governance cycle. Namely, next slide. Thank you. MIP65, Project Clydesdale, MIP66, Pairwise Licensure, and MIP67, Methodology Review and Process for a Structured Finance Transactions. I was going to spend some more time talking about these ones, but not enough time. Next slide, please. Thank you. So governance communications, data insights, and protocol engineering have submitted their budgets. The first two, that is governance communications and data insights, have also submitted new mandates. You may have noticed that there are 2 budgets for governance communications. One of them contains an expansion that the other lacks. If both get approved, the one that lacks the expansion will be immediately discarded, and the one with the expansion will be executed. Next slide, please. We have a coordinate onboarding proposal set for events 001, whose mission is to handle planning, organization, and execution of MakerDAO branded events. Next slide. Thank you. So MIP 7C3 SP7 and MIP 4C2 SP18 are interrelated proposals that formalize the addition of the Collateral Engineering Services core unit as part of the Collateral Onboarding workflow. We also have a MIP 6C3 SP2, which aims to improve the current collateral application form. Next slide. And finally, MIP 47C3 SP1 dissolves the MakerDAO-owned multisig for the afforded content production core unit. These proposals will go on chain as ratification polls on Monday 11, and these polls will run for 2 weeks. Now, as for proposals in RFC, next slide. We have a MIP 68, a self-contained collateral onboarding MIP that we onboard and activate a real-world asset vault backed by the assets of a trust arranged by monetalis. MIP 69 formalizes technical work completed to deliver fast withdrawals on layer 2. MIP 70 onboards and activates a real-world asset vault with priority for the purpose of acquiring loans from HV Bank. And MIP 71 exempts MIP 70 from MIP 65 fly collateral blockings. MIP 72 authorizes Sixes Capital as a real-world asset arranger for MakerDAO. And MIP 63 is a MIP 65 inspired self-contained collateral onboarding MIP. Next slide. So the remaining 3 proposals have been in RFC for some time now. We have a budget proposal for the strategic happiness core unit, and 2 amendments that aim to improve the core unit framework by revising the budget process and the core unit offboarding process. And that's pretty much all from me. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it, Pablo. Sounding great. All right, next up, I see Artem popping up to give us the forum general updates. Take it away.
Yep, just posted the link in the chat, and welcome everybody. Good day. My name's Artem from GovComms, and welcome to the forum recap, where we quickly review what's happened on the forums, our top news, announcements, discussions, and signal requests. And this will be covering the week of March 31st to April 6th. And we'll begin with our top announcements. Starting with us welcoming Penn Blockchain, a new recognized delegate who submitted their delegate platform. They are one of the largest student-run blockchain organizations, and we'll be speaking about their delegate platform at the upcoming Meet Your Delegate call happening on April the 13th. Next up, the Grove Core Unit announces the request and community support to develop a Maker brand team to help market MakerDAO to a wider audience and better engage with existing users. They really break down the vision and strategy for this. It's a pretty well planned out post, so check it out. And next up, we have GovAlpha introducing the Forum Explorer, which is a discourse plugin added to the forum to improve user experience when navigating the forums by using accessible filters and custom queries. Also, me from GovComms will be helping out a bit to manage some weekly highlight posts based off the summary publications that we post. And moving on to our top discussions. Recognized delegate Dunam submits a discussion on using large capitalization coins as off-chain collaterals. He also asks the community whether they support this idea, and if so, what should be the minimum requirement of DAI minted for these large cap coins. So go and submit your opinion in the polls that he provides. The polls actually close today, pretty soon. And next up, recognized delegate MakerMan submitted an aggressive growth proposal for Maker 3.0, the future of crypto lending. This proposal is broken down into 3 concrete actions, some with several sub-actions and additional considerations. It then concludes with a discussion section to prompt some feedback and discussion from the community itself. And finally, we have Monkey Irish, who posted a call to action advising the Maker community members against shifting important issues at hand, which only result in new issues, and instead encourages in solving current issues that we have. And towards this goal, he is asking the community to vote no on any MIPs that include severe prioritization or promote a sentiment to block some kind of current existing issues that we should work on. And moving on to our signal requests, there's currently one active signal going on, which is pretty straightforward, where Psychonaut submits a signal request to push MIP4 C3, which is amend MIP 64 to allow more flexibility in scope as an on-chain poll. And this vote will run until April 12th. And so far, it is currently passing with the yes votes at 39%. And that's it for the forum recap. There's a lot more at the forum at a glance itself and some little updates thanks to me checking out what Blimpa does with his posts, which really cool. But yeah, check it out. There's ongoing initiatives and help wanted, as well as a 3-point summary. Thanks.
Thanks, Artem. Yeah, always great to learn from one another. Love the new format. Awesome. So that should bring us to initiative updates. I believe the first one is going to be run by David.
Yes, it is me. And it's only going to be one. So there's only one initiative for today, and that is for on-chain collateral management. And as the internal core units at MakerDAO call it, CMON. All right, so this initiative is quite large. To give you an idea of what's involved, Collateral, we used to think about it as just onboarding and offboarding, but really a holistic approach or a holistic view of Collateral is really not just the onboarding, offboarding, but also the maintenance and all of the things that kind of go on top of those three foundational functions. This includes priority setting, processes, workflow coordination between the many different core units that are involved in this initiative, which I've listed the main ones here, but collateral engineering services, protocol engineering, sidestream auction services, oracles, risk growth, my team GovComs, and sustainable ecosystem scaling. And so today I'm going to give you a brief update on this initiative, and we're going to go through a handful of things. First, I'm going to give you the products in implementation. I'm going to talk about what we've achieved in terms of collaterals, D3Ms, PSMs, institutional vaults, and also what's in progress and what's upcoming. And then following that, I'm going to go into the actual initiative milestones from a very high level. And I may be calling upon a handful of people involved in the initiative to fill in some additional context. So for the first section, we're going to go through all of the different implementations that we've been keeping an eye on and tracking for the last couple of months. So for one, we've achieved the milestone to onboard the Curve LP token for staked ETH over ETH. So we recently got that up at the beginning of this month, I believe. And next collaterals under consideration are wrap staked ETH C, PAX G, GNO, RETH, and SETH2. Of course, at the moment, the groups involved in priority and priority setting are in the process of determining what should be next. And actually, yeah, there's some more really exciting updates because the groups just published recommended metrics for collateral onboarding to help guide in these decisions, and also an updated collateral status index sheet. But we'll get to that later. As for D3M implementations, the quick update is that in general, there's a large code rewrite happening to make onboarding D3Ms from various platforms a lot more easy and streamlined and efficient. In parallel, the Compound D3M is going through, I believe, an internal or an external code review right now before it is formally launched. Next D3Ms under consideration are Rari Pools, Maple Finance, Aave Arc, Notional Finance, and TrueFi. As for institutional vaults, we've had a long-running initiative to partner with Nexo on their big institutional vault, and so that is still in progress. It's been a bit slow going back and forth with them, making progress on this. But meanwhile, Nadia and the team from Growth are looking for other potential clients to work out institutional vault deals. And so here I'm going to pause and just give Nadia a chance here. Is there anything else that we want to add to this slide?
Nope. I just want to add that it has been taking so long because institutional vaults, it's like a product by its own. And also there are a lot of risks associated to these vaults because they are so large. So we have been like developing the product while in the last months. So one of the things we thought was that it has to be, it is important to audit the code that Nexo is using to automate the protection of the vault, because we don't want that vault to be liquidated. So it is super important for us to understand that everything is correct. And also Nexo or any other institution will need an interface to access this vault. So we have been talking with Oasis, who also is building this interface. So yeah, like it is a complex product, but we think that after we launch it, it will be easy to onboard new institutions. And that is why we are like reaching out all of these institutions with this product, which is super attractive for them.
Yeah, sweet. Thanks for adding the context, Nadia. Yeah, the first one is always the hardest, but after that, things tend to get easier, refined, standardized. Yeah, cool. All right, and so that's it for our products and implementation section. We're gonna polish that for next time to make it a little bit more comprehensive. But in general, moving on, this is the overall milestone list for the initiative. And I've grouped milestones, because we have 10 of them, into 4 main categories. There are process upgrades around collateral management. There are technological upgrades around collateral management. There's housekeeping around collateral management. And there are products that are being developed within collateral management. And so today I'm just going to talk briefly about the categories, kind of one at a time, so that I can condense these 10 milestones into really 4 major updates. And so for the process upgrades, this has been probably the highest priority milestone within the initiative since we've started. And so Robert has really been spearheading milestone 1 and milestone 4 for the revision of the collateral onboarding process. And this includes actually a number of different things. It's an update of the collateral application process. It's the onboarding of CES as a domain team. It's the publishing of a new collateral status index. It's also determining the prioritization criteria for collateral. It's updating the actual process documentation itself. And finally, it creates a process for parallel work alignments between all of the different teams involved from step 1 to launch. And so I'm going to give a pause here and give it over to Robert if you want to speak to these 2 milestones.
Thanks, David. Wow, you did great justice, and I appreciate that summary. And yes, there's a lot of work that's currently in progress. We just completed our Q1 review in the meeting prior to this. We'll post the video, and that'll give you a lot more detail as far as what we did in Q1 and what we're planning to do in Q2. But the key about this is to ensure that we have a process that works for our community, that onboards collateral, and we can do this in a safe, secure, and cost-effective manner. So today is part of that process to do the outreach into the community and collect feedback, so we can make sure that we hear what the community is experiencing and take that in and incorporate to the next steps. As it relates to collateral offboarding, this is part of our collateral maintenance. And so in the collateral management lifecycle, we have onboarding and collateral maintenance, and they're 2 distinct phases and steps. Got to get the collateral into the system, and then we have to manage it. And so I'm super excited because we've hired an individual as a program manager to take over all the processes that we're managing, and she'll start on May 11th. And she has a lot of experience in program management and also bringing people together. And so during the quarter, we'll start to work more fully on the collateral offboarding, because this too is a pretty significant area of work. And there's a lot of feedback and opinions on how we might go about doing this. And we'll also build on the MIPs that have currently been published today to build on collateral offboarding. So I'll pause there because I could talk for a while on this, and I want to give the floor back to you, David.
Yeah, sweet. I think another key thing with these two milestones is really trying to depersonalize the reasons for prioritizing one thing over another, and also for offboarding something. So you know, a lot of times I hear in the community that core units tend to be seen as the gatekeepers for collateral, and in a lot of ways that's true. But in other ways, what this process revision aims to do is to really kind of standardize and objectify what those recommended metrics are, so that it's less about the opinion, the subjective opinions of core units, and more about sort of an objective guidance that can bring everybody to the same answers, regardless of personal opinion or anything like that. So I think that's a big part of this revision. All right, moving on. There is the technological upgrades category. And so this involves milestone 2, which is the liquidations infrastructure cleanup, milestone 10, which is to deliver the D3M rewrite, and milestone 7, PSM improvements. So for milestone 2, liquidations infrastructure cleanup, the main goal for this milestone was really to hand off to the new sidestream auction services core unit all of the touch points for liquidations, and also to completely sort of transition from the old auction UIs into the new UIs that SAS has developed, and also to transition to the new auction demo keeper that SAS has been working on. And so all of these things are in progress, not quite finished yet, but I know if anybody from SAS is here, do you guys want to speak to this milestone? All right, yeah, nobody's here, that's right. We're quite far along here, and I don't know if you've seen the auctions.makerdao.com UI. I don't think that's where the new one is up yet. It's still running the old UI, but I believe auctions.makerdao.network is where the SAS UI is, and it's very close to being ready to be switched over for the main MakerDAO UI. For milestone,
if you want,
yeah.
David, I can add
Sure.
just a little bit more color to that as well. They're also like piggybacking off of the code that they've made for the UI to make an actual standalone keeper in the same way that we have the auction demo keeper. And just from the particle engineering unit's perspective, like that's a huge help, because we've been maintaining a keeper, which is like a little bit outside of our kind of core discipline. And it's going to be really nice when we can sort of hand that off, and that's not part of the collateral onboarding process for our team as well.
Yeah, sweet. And then for milestone 10, we have the delivery of a D3M rewrite. And so Chris, do you want to speak briefly to that?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just say that there's a lot of these particular ways of sort of providing, I don't know, credit or DAI into other protocols. And, you know, we have the Aave D3M, and it became pretty clear that there's like a number of other potential protocols, Compound, the Rari fuse pools, like a bunch of different protocols that could benefit from the same thing. And so there's a bit of a sort of, we went sort of with a lot of breadth in order to figure out exactly like what the requirements would be for each one of these, and are doing a bit of a rewrite so that it'll be really easy for us once we're finished to just sort of hand this off to collateral engineering, and then have collateral engineering basically like deploy these sort of bespoke D3Ms if governance so wishes. So.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah, thank you for the context. And then lastly, milestone 7, which is sort of the lowest priority of everything I've mentioned so far, is PSM improvements. And this one is actually slated to be focused more towards Q3, I believe. But yeah, those are the three main technological upgrades in the queue. As for housekeeping, there's only a couple of milestones here. So one is the stablecoin vault cleanup, and this is thoroughly in progress. As many of you might have noticed, TUSD is being offboarded, I believe, with the, I don't want to say next Friday's executive, I believe it's the Friday after that, the 15th. And so TUSD is being offboarded, but what are left are USDC, USDP, and man, I hope I can recall this from the top of my head. USDP, and there is one more. But basically, there's three different stablecoin vaults in the traditional sense, like like USDC8 type vaults rather than PSMs. And so the idea is for the remaining vaults, we want to offload them and pretty much have all of our stablecoin exposure at MakerDAO managed through PSMs. And so this is the next step for milestone 6 is really to offload the other three stablecoin vault types in a bundle. And this would essentially liquidate them into the PSM. And so, Chris, do you want to speak a little bit to that? Because I know we're doing that batch slightly different than actually completely differently compared to how we did TUSD.
Yeah, just the high level is, TUSD is going to be a sort of typical liquidations turned on, kind of a rate limited liquidation through a normal liquidation mechanism in order to recapitalize the DAI. Whereas the other stable coins like USDC and PAX and GUSD, they all have, they have like, vault types and PSM components. And so we're going to, basically take this contract that'll allow us to effectively like liquidate the underwater vaults directly into their respective PSMs. And that way, it's not so much like reclaiming the DAI, it's like shifting the DAI over to the PSM, and so that it's just available in the PSM.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Chris. And then lastly, for housekeeping is we want to respond to all the greenlit MIP6 applications. And so this is just a part of increasing the stakeholder experience for people who want to come in and partner with MakerDAO, whether they actually end up bringing a deal to fruition or not. We find it to be important to really respond and have a high standard for how we communicate with people applying at MakerDAO. And so, Robert, do you have any context to add to this particular one?
I do, David. Thank you.
All right.
So our plan is to next week to start to post onto the existing MIP6s that are greenlit. This does not change the status. It simply allows them to look at the proposed collateral application template, which is currently in formal submission, take a look at those questions, the clarification, and also to take a look at the guidelines that was published today to be able to take and then update their MIP6s so they can include the additional information and signal to us, are they still interested in moving forward in the process? And also for the ones that aren't, to simply let us know, and then we'll take and then remove them from the list. So we believe this will help us understand who is interested in moving forward and not, to do the first round of cleanup on the collateral status index. And so I've posted the draft index that we're starting to use. We used it in both of our collateral alignment meetings, both the on-chain and off-chain this week. It seemed to work really well to be able to quickly move through where collateral is at, how we're working through that, the next steps, and then it's pretty clear that there are some issues. Obviously, there are a lot of greenlit collateral that's been sitting there for a long period of time. So again, this is a step-by-step. This is another 3-foot toss that we're doing on the road to cleaning up this process. So hopefully that's helpful for the community to understand what some of the next steps are.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. And finally, the last bucket, our products. So we have 3 milestones relating to products. One was to onboard the Curve staked ETH LP token, which is delivered. The only thing left with this milestone is actually to do the debt ceiling expansion. And I believe that there is a small expansion plan for this next executive vote. It's going to go from 3 million to 5 million. But then following a proposed parameter forum post by Risk, I believe they're going to be proposing something like 50 million, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, look out for that. And basically, once the debt ceiling is expanded, this milestone will be considered completely complete. Milestone 5 is to onboard the compound D3M, and this is somewhat happening in parallel and is somewhat blocked by the D3M rewrite in general, if I'm not mistaken. Or it might be that it's already code complete. It's just going through reviews. Chris, can you actually clarify me on that?
Yeah, actually, I'm trying to remember if it's already off to audit. Send it, maybe Derek or
not
Chris
yet. So we're doing an internal team review at the moment, and the next audit window we're hoping to get it in for that. So yeah, the reason for this is that modular discussion that Chris mentioned earlier. So really making sure that it's extensible, scalable, and that's what's driving some of the discussion around how we build the internal maker piece and then the external bit. So to help all the integration. So yeah, that's underway, and yeah, hoping to have more on that coming up soon as well.
Yeah, cool. And then the last one is the launch of the first institutional vault, which we gave a little bit of an update earlier. So I'm not gonna redundantly repeat too much information here. But yeah, so those are our 10 milestones in 4 different buckets. And actually, just to go back to give you guys a little bit more context in terms of like target dates for completion, our confidence level, and the statuses. Everything is in progress except for really the first institutional vault, which it says blocked, but it's kind of back to in progress now. There was some stuff blocking it for the last few weeks, but we managed to unblock it now. And end of Q2 seems to be like a low confidence target date. It may look like it really depends. It depends on a lot, so it's hard to say with high confidence on the target date. As for everything else from top down, really we're still on track for end of Q2 for the majority of these. We don't have like mega high confidence level until we come close to the finish line. So in general, the update is that everything here is on track, with the exception of PSM improvements, which is just a low priority milestone that we're pushing. So to give the PE team, the bandwidth to do other higher priority stuff. And so, yeah, that is about it for the collateral management on-chain status update. Here are some useful links. So the production coordination tracker, where we look at all of the milestones and individual work items that have to be completed, is actually publicly viewable. So if you're curious to look at it from time to time or bookmark it, feel free, because we're doing work in there week to week. I also encourage you to visit collateral.makerdao.com. The CES team has done a ton of work revising those pages, so check it out. And I've also added a couple of forum posts, one detailing the collateral management lifecycle, and another that was posted just recently, which is the MIPS 6 recommended guideline metrics for on-chain collateral onboarding. And so, yeah, thank you. And we're going to be moving into our discussion.
I was going to say the same thing. Thanks, David. Awesome. So I believe we have one main discussion topic, and it is closely related. Looks like Robert is ready to maybe kick us off on this.
Yeah, I drew the short straw on this one. Oh, hey everyone. I'm helping kicking this section off. I seem to be the likely candidate to provide some context and background for this. Just please be aware, I'm also a participant as well. I too have a lot of questions. So Peyton, would you go to the next slide? So let's talk about how we got here, since the history of our collateral is actually very important. Since the MCD launch, which is the multi-collateral DAI launch at the end of 2019, I don't think any of us would have anticipated the growth we've had with the protocol. To support this growth, our collateral and onboarding has tried to keep up with the quick pace of our industry. We went from onboarding ETH and BAT at the time of launch, then to onboard just about every ERC20 collateral we could find. We exhausted those tokens. We offboarded some. We created the wrapped BTC market. We experimented with other strategies like LP tokens, adding PSMs and institutional vaults, and now D3Ms, RWAs, L2s, and some hybrid solutions that are starting to pop up. Some of the processes we have today were not built to handle the evolution of our collateral over the past 2.5 years. I want to use RWA as an example. What it looked like to onboard an RWA was completely unknown back then. Members of the community like Long, Charles, Rune, Planet X, and others wrote the initial MIPs and processes to define collateral onboarding. And I'm pretty sure they weren't thinking about RWAs, let alone these hybrids that are a little bit of off-chain and on-chain technology, business, legal, and deal making. History is important, and it's also easy to forget. It's helpful to remember as we shape our future. Peyton, next slide, please. Today, we have a collateral onboarding process. Yes, it's real, and we use it to the best of our ability. The we I refer to are the on-chain collateral stakeholders, the off-chain collateral stakeholders, and the mandated actors. To be clear, this list includes protocol engineering, oracles, risk, real-world finance, growth, CES, SES, GovComs, GovAlpha, and the incubation CUs of LTS, which is legal, and LOVE, which is Luca and the oversight committee. The process was created by the MakerDAO community members shortly before the Maker Foundation was dissolved. I mentioned a few of them just a moment ago. I think we all realize the process isn't perfect, but there is a process with prioritization, and we have a baseline. From my perspective, our opportunities for growth are in the transparency, communication, prioritization, and commitment areas. The current process may or may not look like this graphic when we are complete with the next iteration, but I just want everyone to know that CES is committed to finding a solution that works, whatever that might look like, to scale the supply of DAI safely and securely in the most cost-effective manner possible. Peyton, next slide, please. As it relates to our current challenges, my assessment of the feedback that I've received is around what I'm calling the big four: transparency, communication, prioritization, and commitment. I believe these areas represent a critical component of the evolution of our current collateral processes. During our CES Q1 update today, we went into a little bit more detail on our plans for Q2. The video will be posted shortly, and I recommend to listen when you get a chance. I don't want to spend time telling you what I think. I want to ask you what you're experiencing so we can make this process better. I'm also, again, participating in this discussion because I too have a lot of unanswered questions. While we've done a lot of work between the core units, work remains to ensure all key stakeholders are aligned. When there is an issue identified and where there's already a defined process, my first step is to take a big step back, collect information, then move forward again. That is what I'm hoping to do on this call. Feedback is a critical component of surfacing a solution that will bring alignment as it relates to our collateral onboarding. So to start this conversation, I'll share one of the biggest challenges CES faces as it relates to collateral onboarding or our collateral process. And it's how do we effectively prioritize collateral in the context of our DAO priorities? So let me give you a little example. So right now, if you take a look at some of the conversations, the initiatives, the implicit agreements that we have in our community, it's really clear that we want to reduce the dependencies on USDC and the PSM. And there's a lot of ways to go about that. And I think that's a worthwhile goal or objective. We also have what we're saying at RWAs, or real world assets, are a priority. Okay, which ones? Clean money ones, arranger ones, which ones? And there's another side of this that is like, we have collateral technology that is critical to enabling the onboarding of collateral. So when we see a technology like the D3M and go, hey, here's a possible solution to help us assist in the generation of DAI, it's like, oh, wow, this is great. So it's really challenging for me to understand what the priority is based upon our DAO objectives. I'm happy to align on whatever this might be, because it makes my job a lot easier. And I also realize it's common to have multiple priorities and focuses. That's just the normal way of things working. But my goal is to ensure the CES core unit deliverables match the community expectations. So back to my question, I'll just pose it out to the community. Ideas on how we effectively prioritize collateral in the context of our DAO priorities? That's pretty much I have. I want to leave it there and allow the discussion to continue. And I'll listen, and I would love feedback, and I would love other people to ask other questions to continue this discussion. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it, Robert. Yeah, so I have seen some comments in the chat here. If anyone wants to hop on the mic, feel free to do so. Also, a reminder, if you want to utilize that raise hand function, we can get a bit of a queue going.
Robert, can you touch on the difference in time that it takes for an on-chain collateral to go from application to implementation versus a real-world asset or an off-chain collateral?
I'll be happy to give my feedback, and then if others on the call, especially people from the real-world asset team or the real-world finance team, that'd be great. So generally speaking, if for an on-chain piece of on-chain collateral, the process pretty much works as from the time the MIP6 application hits, it's 2 weeks in RFC, then 2 weeks in the greenlit poll. Once it comes out of there, we enter into a prioritization process. And currently, the old status, collateral status index that is currently being used in the forums does have a tab of a prioritization model that we've been using up to date to help us guide the decisions we make on pulling collateral in. So the front end of this process is, I say 4+ weeks. The quickest you can get through is 4 weeks. The back end of that process, the way that it's defined, the way the documentation reads, is about 4 weeks. So some things can move faster. As an example, once we've onboarded a piece of collateral like staked ETH and the discussions to do different vault types, right? So we can easily move that through much quicker than an 8-week process. But if it's known, it's an ERC20, we've worked with it before, we have the tech already available to us, we can very rapidly move this through the system. On the real world finance side of things, our challenge becomes in the deal and the legal aspects and knowing exactly what we have. Because right now it seems like from a tech perspective, all roads lead to the MIP21. And that's okay. We just need to understand, to get to that point, because the MIP21 essentially means that all of the areas in the way of liquidations or pricing, if there is any aspect of that, or if there is a token, most of these deals don't have that. So it's a dummy token and emergency shutdown. All of that has to be defined in a legal agreement that's off chain. And the amount of time that can take is entirely up to the complexity of the deal and where we might see incompleteness in the application or in the terms that are being defined. And so if anyone from the real world finance team wants to pipe in, that's fine. But that can greatly expand the deal. And so if you look at the collateral status index, the new one, I have a T+ column, and that means the time plus the application. So you'll see that the current real world assets that have been onboarded or greenlit are significantly more time than the ones that are on chain. So it's different, and we need to know that it's different. And we're trying to put together the processes that recognize the differences so we can move it through the system. So hopefully, David, that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. That's really good context. Thank you.
Is he MakerMan bringing up prioritization in the side chat, and Long mentioned his comments. So unless there's more to say about the real world asset side, happy to jump into the prioritization question.
All right, it seems like no, so maybe I'll go. Yes, so I just wanted to comment a little bit on Robert's point around us, I guess, not having good, I guess, prioritization tools available currently. Like a kind of key, like so Robert was saying, a key part of this process is like transparency and communication between governance and core units. And thus far, like all of our kind of voting processes are all, also for the way we use them, has always been like prioritize this thing like in a vacuum without comparing it to other things that we might want to do, which is probably better than nothing, but it's not really that workable in the long term, for what I hope fairly obvious reasons. So the sort of general hope is that we could kind of provide a sort of voting primitive that better handles like relative prioritizations. And that's something that sort of GovAlpha and Dux are going to be working on, I think, in this quarter. I'm sort of hoping to be able to sort of trial something in the next few months if everything goes well. It's something that we potentially should have prioritized earlier, but like obviously we had a lot of other stuff as well. But it's kind of fairly obvious that like the lack of that is one of the things which is contributing to this kind of confusion and sort of I guess tension around like what we should be focusing on with when it comes to collateral onboarding and just like generally like stuff that we're implementing. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I guess to kind of follow up on that, it's like not super easy, right, to communicate across core units because different core units might have different priorities, right? We've all budgeted for different objectives for different initiatives, and when the DAO comes along and votes something new in, a lot of coordination effort needs to take place. So I think we've come a long way with setting up cross core unit initiatives, but working things into a true priority framework that really prioritizes governance input while still preserving core unit autonomy is kind of a tough nut to crack, I guess. So definitely open for collaborators and further ideas on that. You can expect a forum post from us on the subject tomorrow to kind of get things started. But yeah, it feels like there's still a lot of difficult questions to answer. Yeah, go for it, Wouter.
Yes, I wanted to just quickly try and connect the dots a little bit with the MIP 65 that was posted and the reaction against it. I think it's important to see that these are connected, right? So the prioritization discussion is a very old discussion, and since the beginning there have been a lot of concerns that the prioritization isn't transparent, and that for outsiders there often has been the concern that core units have too much discretion in deciding which collateral types get prioritized. For insiders, it's a very different situation. We know there have been coordination processes in place. We know that the discussions about prioritization have always been intended as objective as possible process. But due to the even perceived lack of transparency, I think that's sometimes difficult to convince outsiders that that's actually the case. So in that sense, the core units may be making their lives unnecessarily difficult, even though it's not easy to make it fully objective and transparent. But MIP 65 is clearly somewhat of a rift in the community, where it's MKR holders and delegates asking for more information, a little bit pitted against the core units. I hope that whether it passes or not, I don't know if it's super relevant, but if it passes, I personally look at it a little bit as like a very crude crutch, a way of prioritizing. And I do hope, if it passes, that it's really it's a motivation point to make sure that we get to a really transparent and open prioritization process. And then once we have that process in place, it's hopefully no longer necessary, or people wouldn't feel the need to post a MIP like MIP 65, because as many have commented in the thread, in many ways it is a step back of where we want to go. But yeah, if we can see this as an opportunity and an extra motivation to get to this transparent and well-defined prioritization process, I think that might actually be a good thing.
Thanks, Vader. Go for it, Justin. Thanks.
Yeah, I thought I'd wait in a little bit here as a delegate because, yeah, thank you, Long. I was one of the first delegates to actually voice an opinion on the MIP 65 as well, and was taken a little bit aback on the forcefulness of the responses given. I do think we need to be really careful about allowing prioritizations inside the MIPs themselves, because it can very easily lead to an arms race, which you're already seeing examples of. So I'm not happy about that particular part of that MIP, and I don't think it behooves us to do that kind of detailed prioritizations down for the core units, because it's going to lead to an overwhelming amount of governance, or meaning that we have to make all these nitty-gritty details on the DAO level. I do, however, think we need some sort of strategic prioritization that is on the level of the DAO, where the MKR holders get at least a feel that they have a say in how the prioritization is being done, and then really the details to the different core units, because once you get into the weeds of the details, there's a lot of stuff that you didn't necessarily know once you started this process, and that can make a difference on what kind of collateral that makes sense to onboard or not. But as was said before, on the bigger issues, like should we focus on the RVAs, should we focus on the clean money initiatives, these kind of strategic prioritizations should probably be at the DAO level, I think.
Thanks for sharing your perspective there. No.
Yeah, that's, to be honest, Justin, that's pretty close to what we're aiming for as well, like with what we're producing. Like sort of just some method for like make orders to actually be able to communicate those priorities like clearly. So yeah.
I think, sorry, there's people with their hands up. Paul, raise me.
Thanks, David. No, I was just going to say that one of the things about this prioritization topic, I kind of put it in my delegate thing, is this concept that this relates to budgets for me and all these expanding budgets, but it relates to everything, is that, you know, when it comes to prioritization, you kind of want to do that periodically. You know, you go, you have a meeting, Everybody comes to grips with what should be prioritized, what will be done, and then you go off and you do the work and you come back and you do it again. So this idea that we're going to reprioritize every month, let's get past that. We'll be lucky to do it every quarter or semi-annually. So I think we need to think about timeframes and process and how to prioritize and then do that. From the point of view of the outside parties, I mean, literally, if I'm a party that's put $500,000 into legal fees on getting an RWA in here, I kind of want to have an answer pretty quickly to one, whether I should even do that investment, and two, if I did, whether I'm going to get in or not. And so there's a real issue of a mismatch here between outside parties and kind of how we can do process and timeframes. And so I see these as real issues. We can do them, but I think we need to do it organizationally and across the board.
Thank you, man. Do you want to follow that up, David?
Yeah, sure. I was gonna make a point about why personally I'm against sort of like really hard prioritization rules within MIPS, mainly, and also just why I think like people external to being actually part of the prioritization process, like they shouldn't have very, very strong guidelines for like you shouldn't block people from doing other work. And sorry, so my actual point is this, with any collateral, there are these sort of objective shared metrics that we can compare them by. But when you're dealing with the collateral, there are nuances to each. And so if you are mandated, let's say, to work on this collateral to the exclusion of everything else, and there is some sort of like fundamental like bottleneck or problem, or even a part of that process that requires, I don't know, 8 different back and forths with the collateral applicant and the engineering teams, why should that block, I guess, other collateral that might be on the wayside? Like I guess the point I'm trying to make, which I'm not being very articulate about, is I believe we should give core units like the proper amount of autonomy to make these decisions, because they are a lot more involved with seeing those nuances. And I think, yeah, like I just find it very crude, as Long said, to include these kinds of things in MIPS.
So I guess to kind of present the other side that we've been hearing on the forums, right? Like collateral applicants have been saying that it's very difficult for them to engage with the process because in real world lending, essentially, you can sign a letter of intent saying, hey, all right, if everything checks out, the deal is good. Whereas with the DAO, can kind of go back on its word anytime. It's much harder to anticipate when deals might be finalized, and there's always the unfortunate kind of deal breaker that MKR holders could just vote down the proposal at the last moment. So the feedback, I guess, that we've got from why the prioritization isn't included in some of these proposals is that essentially it's a way for collateral teams to ensure that them spending the money on the legal structure, on everything else is actually going to be fruitful. So that's certainly something that will play into our process as we scale, even if whether or not we choose to accept prioritization frameworks self-contained within MIPS. All right, do we have more to say about the collateral management, either the cycle or general goings on in the forum at the moment?
One more thought I just had, Peyton. It seems like if we are including prioritization in the MIPS themselves, it would have a chilling effect on future MIPS. So if the organization's goal is to increase the throughput of our real world assets that we're getting in as collateral, and we start letting MIP prioritization happen in this way, future RWAs are going to look at that and say, well, I'm sixth in line of the current prioritization. I'm not even going to attempt this until we get through some of this, and we're going to actually see fewer RWA collaterals get proposed, and we may be less willing to take on smaller RWAs if they're taking this prioritization approach, because we don't want to block some, future unknown RWA that might come through and have to be deprioritized because we've passed, a $10 million whatever trial run with priority. So there may also be, beyond the core unit perspective, there may be other collateral prioritization costs.
Yeah, go for it, Eric.
Sorry, do I have the floor? Thank you.
All yours.
Regarding RWA, the process, coming from the real world, been in finance too long and doing deals, you typically, I just want to talk about typically in the real world and what we're doing and what we don't know how to do. You would work with a potential borrower, and if you like what they're doing and you agree to a reasonable set, not all the terms, but high level terms, you sign a term sheet, and then both sides, we always sign it. It's not really legally binding, but your reputation matters. And the idea is if further diligence confirms what the borrower told you, you're going to do a deal at those terms. Part of the challenge we have, and there's a bunch of challenges, but we'll have borrowers that come to us and they'll make a proposal and they'll say, I want an 80% advance rate with a 2% debt, stability fee. And we're like, okay. We look in the real world. In the real world, the market would give them 65% advance and a 5% stability fee. So what they're asking is markedly worse to maker than they could ever get in the real world. We're not there to negotiate, but then what do we do? So there's stages of when this will happen, but we're getting a lot of proposals that are arguably very, very unfair to maker. If you consider maker wants to do, roughly real world market terms, or at least want to know where the real world is. And if it's going to subsidize someone's, they want to know how much you're subsidizing them. And so if we're not negotiating, which we're really not, how does this ever get dealt with? Do we post in the community and say, hey, they want 80 LTV. Here's the real world, supporting 60, and here's my evidence. Token holders, do you want to vote on this? And then part of the challenge there at the next level is it's not just rate and debt ceiling. Before you get a deal done, where's Christian if he's here? There's going to be dozens and dozens of points, that really matter. And we can have them all posted and all negotiated on the forum by the maker token holders, but it's going to be just boatloads of votes and things to think about. And let me be honest with you, part of the challenge in the real world is look, maker could get all 20 terms it wants with a smart borrower, but if the smart borrower gets the next 150 terms, you could never get your money back and they wouldn't violate the agreement. There's a lot of ways to hollow things out and, and put in things that are really unfair to maker. And so when people are asking unfair things to maker, at least in our professional judgment, how does the community want to handle this?
Thanks for that, Eric. Louder, I see you might have a response.
Yeah, so I think Eric is bringing up really good points, but I do think there are actually two different discussions, because prioritization does not mean necessarily that a deal has to be accepted or not accepted. That is a different discussion, and it's definitely, that is another challenge. How are core units supposed to even know what is acceptable and not acceptable according to maker governance? So I think, yeah, it's a big one and it probably should be discussed separately. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that sometimes the assumption is made that there's one way of doing things the right way, and if core units are following the right way, then it's just a matter of showing that to MKR holders, and then everyone will be happy. But of course, the complicated reality is that MKR holders and delegates don't necessarily agree on what is the right way, and that's the specifically the issue with collateral onboarding is that, and this point was brought up before, what you think is the right priority really depends on which kind of vision strategy you want to follow for the DAO. And this puts core units in a particularly difficult position to make their own decisions when it comes to prioritization, because whichever rule you follow, and it doesn't matter like how diligently and objectively you stick to the rule, there's always going to be MKR holders and delegates who are really, really upset about the fact that you prioritize one way or another. So because of that situation, this transparency is really the only way to, as a core unit, also defend the work that you're doing, because then you can say, well, maybe you don't agree with the way that we are prioritizing, but that is a different discussion. At the very least, we can show that we are following a consistent set of rules and that we don't take favorites, or that we don't pick favorites. We follow an objective set of rules. And separating these discussions, I think, is incredibly important. It's a very different situation if you have someone who is unhappy with the situation or unhappy with the prioritization order that is followed, but knowing that core units are just following the rules that are objectively defined and by some way agreed on, versus core units working in a less transparent manner, just saying, trust us, we are professionals, we take the right decisions. And of course, the level, like some degree of trust is needed, but sometimes there are just like genuine disagreements on which approach should be taken. And in those cases, once again, transparency is your best defense, because then you can show that you are following an objective set of rules and no, you are not picking favorites. And that is very important.
Thanks, Tyler. I see a recognized delegate with their hand. Kianka, you want to take it away?
Yeah, I'd like to hear from the core units how much time you're spending on defense. So I appreciate that we need transparency, communication, but I'm concerned about the energy and the focus and the capacity to do the work, to execute on the vision, the offensive leaning in. And we are like sitting ducks to be flooded with proposals and questions and sort of, you know, all the things. And then you all have to respond and communicate and defend. And at what point, you know, are we, you know, are you feeling sabotaged by that dilemma? And like, how do we find that balance of expectations around communication? And then I really love to see you all be able to spend your time, you know, getting your goals accomplished that don't change, right, in terms of prioritization, like every week or every month, which is, we're going to just keep going like this.
Go for it, Eric.
Yeah, I hope Christian's here to give you his own input, but I say we spend a lot of time on stuff that is arguably, at least from our mind, way off market, you know, and what the folks are asking for. I mean, I think we need to be more proactively transparent. We've tried not to, you know, share the dirty laundry and say, we think you're, you know, not qualified for these 15 reasons. You don't want to like just slam people in the public. But I think we need to be politely much more sharing. And then the community wants to do it. But like, here's why we think it's not a good idea. And we spent so much time around a few big name transactions, as everyone knows. You know, and then when you tell them you're off market and we think these 6 items are really problematic, they wind up being very political and finding lots and lots of different ways to try to make it happen. Where I think we just need us to say, here's our top 6 reasons. They don't agree with us, maker holders, token holders, what do you want to do?
And if I can add, it's Luca here, if I can add on what Eric has been saying is, I think we need to acknowledge the fact that the parties that want to make business with Maker, although they can be in the best possible faith, they don't have the incentives aligned. Their interests are their business interests, not necessarily aligned with the DAO. And we should instead assume that the core units are working as servants of the DAO. This is a preamble to say that we would expect adverse selection on the communication intensity, meaning that those that have the lowest quality proposals will be the ones that are the most vocal on forums. So we need to give trust to the core units that they can handle it. Otherwise, it will be fully biased. The time will be totally biased towards those that have their proposals the most distance from market standards, as Eric said, and hence, they will hijack most of the attention. And I think ultimately it is a matter of trust on the core units, as Voter mentioned.
I think it's a good point that the lender is never really aligned with his borrower, because every dollar of interest he has to pay us is a dollar out of his pocket. I mean, you can try to make more aligned, but there's a bit of a zero-sum game going on. Being a lender, you're not making friends, let's be honest. You want to be fair and respectful, but you're not out there to make friends.
Thanks for the input there. Yeah, I see a lot of comments in the chat about like proactive transparency, right? And I guess structurally kind of important to put in, right? The facilitator is supposed to be the touch point for the core units with the DAO. So like, while you as a facilitator might be spending a lot of time on transparency, on discussion, right? Like you in theory have a team that can be working on your objectives while you're fielding the questions. But it is up to core units and their facilitators how they want to handle that and structure that within their teams. Yeah, go for one.
I wanted to drive the Wouter's point, like hammer it down, right? Like there is a lot of time being spent on defensive communication, and maybe it is true that the loudest people are the worst, or maybe it's not. But what we do need to do as core units is focus on transparency, and this is important because otherwise the MKR holders, they are not seeing the progress or how things are moving forward. So we do need to make sure that this happens. And I think that this is what it is. This MIP might not be the best. There are a lot of things that I would address, but eventually it is the MKR holders, or maybe not the MKR holders yet, but at least the community saying, hey, we don't see the priorities. Please do something about this because this needs to be fixed.
Thanks, man. Aren't you a dev, Sam? Awesome. Noticing the time, we are getting towards the end of our typical length here. Are there other last comments or questions who would like to submit before we wrap up today?
Yeah, it's Eric. Being the one main RWA here now, I do want to say from our perspective, we do need a better process. There needs to be a lot more transparency, but like we need a process that works for potential borrowers as well. When we're out there, makers in the market wanting good borrowers to come to us, they have to think there's a fair, reasonable process there to work with. And at this point, it kind of feels like we've got, a two-legged horse pulling a one-wheeled cart. It's really hard. And I'm not saying what is the right process, but when we're out there trying to, make business with quality counterparties in the real world, it needs to be a professional standard, that's reliable and consistent. And, if it's getting rugged every 2 months with a new process, you just aren't going to get good borrowers. People don't want to put up with our drama. I wouldn't as a borrower, frankly.
Yeah, Eric, pushing back on that though, we went from an arranger model, right? A proposal of looking at a arranger model, and that kind of has been forgotten about I was super excited myself, and this is Frank from 3F Delegate, super excited about a Ranger model. You know, I was lobbied by a few MIP6 RWA applicants, and I told them to be patient, to wait for the Ranger model. And all of a sudden that's kind of like gone, right? So from someone who's been here for quite a long time, I mean, it feels like I've been here forever, even though I haven't. It's been quite frustrating waiting for RWAs to come into fruition. And now, you know, here we go. And you know, you mentioned something which is 80% LTV is probably not possible in the real world. But then what's the market advantage? What's the advantage of the product market fit of DAI and MakerDAO? Like, if we can't give borrowers 80% at competing stability fee rates versus interest rates in the real world, why should they come to us if we're not going to give them, you know, maybe not 80%, maybe not 85%, maybe 75%? And I guess what I'm saying is, you know, there are defaults in the world, and you know this, Eric. It's going to happen. Maker's going to take a default, and you know, I think we need to stop sugarcoating it. And I kind of get it that, you know, RWF legal team and all you guys out there want to protect the DAO, but there comes a point where we need to accept it that there will be defaults down the road, and it's to be expected. So I guess what I'm asking you is, like, where do we draw the line and say, hey, MakerDAO is the place to come to borrow, as opposed to JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, what have you?
I guess first, I like the Ranger model. I hope it goes through. It's never been voted. I've never really seen a serious proposal to do it, and it's not quite clear what it is, but I think it's a cool idea. But it's never been voted or really fleshed out. Luca,
Eric, can I add something here on the Ranger model, because it's something we have been discussing for a long time. I think, Frank, there is a bit of misconception here about the Ranger model. In finance, everybody is an arranger. Unless you go to meet the specific borrower, a bank is an arranger, an asset management is an arranger, everybody's an intermediary. So I think that the input of the arranger model that we tried to incorporate in the so-called sandbox RWA work that I led was that we wanted to work, instead of working with many borrowers, with a few large relevant counterparties that could have been great channels for us to do stuff at scale. And we still want to do that. That's why, you know, HVB is a bank, is a great potential arranger. An asset manager is a great potential arranger, and potentially also startups like Monetalis, etc. But a arranger model doesn't have to be, in my view, that we are endorsing a black box with hundreds of millions or billions of money to people that might have limited experience on deploying money for us. This is actually creating a gatekeeper, which is a bit different. The second point is on you is, like, nobody wants to be in a business that is zero default. And I think Eric wrote a methodology that says we want to do stuff that is investment grade, so it has a certain level of default, which is prudent. Now, the important thing we want to do is, if we are deploying hundreds of millions, we want to do this with big people that are incentivized alongside us to do good quality work. So we get hit, they get hit. If we don't do that, and we work with counterparties that don't have a lot of history, and they don't have skin in the game, they will just beef up risk because they don't get hit. We get hit. And that's something we want to avoid. But this is something we have been doing over the last few months. I think, going back to Wouter's point, is if RWF, and you know, I'm as incubated lending oversight, I'm one step remote, but I see what RWF does on a daily basis. And if RWF has to spend 90% of work defending itself why it's not working, then it's going to take 10 times the time to do work. It's as simple as that. So I think we need to be aware of, we need to give these guys some, and myself included, some level of trust in finalizing the deals. Otherwise, we go back, we discuss a proposal, it's not market standard, we convince the delegates in the community, good, we move on. 2 weeks later, there is the same proposal with another spin, we discuss it, we move on. 2 weeks later, there is the same proposal with another spin, and it's just like catch-22. And it's something we need to stop. Otherwise, it's going to take 10 times the time. because we work with 10% the effective time. So I think this is, it ultimately goes back to trust and transparency, and we hope we can work on that from now on. I know that RWF has a lot of things to improve, and we are all working with the other core units to do that.
And thanks. And one answer on Frank's point. Look, I was saying 80 LTV and 60 as an example. It's not anything specific, but let me try to paint the point. I think it makes off-market deals, it should, but I think it should also understand how off-market it is. Let's say the deal the real world does a 70 LTV. Maker wants to do 80 LTV, with the same interest rate. That's fine, do it. But no, like if you had to sell our loan the next day, once we did it to another sophisticated investor, they'd probably pay 85 or 90 cents on the dollar. So if we were doing a $100 million loan, we're basically giving that borrower $10 to $15 million out of our pocket and subsidizing what they're doing. And I have nothing against that. Just know you're explicitly subsidizing that borrower in their activities versus what the real world would fund it at. And then I think it becomes an important question of who do you want to subsidize and how much.
Thanks for the perspectives there, everyone. Is there any other comments or questions we could address before we wrap up the call?
I'll just also just say, like, yeah, and to Frank's point and Eric, if we want to do something off market, or maybe it's not even appropriate to say off market if we're talking about the real world and this is Web3 or DeFi, but we should be informed and know, and we're doing it for a reason. Like to your point, Frank, why would people come to Maker unless we're giving them better terms? And it should be aligned again with a strategic reason or strategic vision, or that counterparty's going to be able to, help us achieve a very clear and tangible goal. So I think, yeah, that's maybe a decision it'd be nice to make in terms of strategy, which is like, here are the reasons we would do something that's off market relative to the real world, rather than on a case-by-case basis, and help educate the community to know what the difference is, so that if a proposal comes in and it's really nice in terms of its concepts or, whatever it's about presenting, kind of whether it's, whatever reason people may like it, that the community does understand what we may be giving up, or, just what those differences are. And we're voting in an informed way and in a strategic way.
Thanks, Keandra. All right, well, thank you everyone for attending today. Looks like discussion is more or less simmered down, so we'll end the call here. You can join us same time, same place next week. And yeah, thank you.